Hi folks, this is Dr. Cywes, the Carb Addiction Doc, and today we're going to discuss quite a controversial topic, the pros and cons of alcohol. And we're going to start with some of the benefits of alcohol first. And over here, I'm going to throw a shout out to Dry Farm Wines. Dry Farm Wines has entered the ketogenic space by producing ultra low carbohydrate wines that are organically sourced. Now, I would urge you to go to their website and check them out. I get no financial contribution from them. I'm not that guy. But certainly I have enjoyed their wines from time to time, and I think it is a good understanding. So let's go through the pros of alcohol. Well, first and foremost, the reason we drink alcohol is not for the taste. It's not for some magical nutrient quantity or quality. The reason we drink alcohol is to get high. That's what alcohol does, give us a buzz. So all human beings from time to time benefit from an instantly rewarding, instantly gratifying substance that rapidly and powerfully activates the endorphin system just to dissipate emotional tension. Every day we're all experiencing anxiety and stress and depression and anger and fear and frustration and sadness and boredom and pleasure. And from time to time, an alcoholic beverage is a very effective, very healthy way to dissipate that emotional tension. Valuable asset. I drink alcohol from time to time. I've even been drunk from time to time. But my consumption of alcohol, and this is what I would urge you to do, is to have very tight boundaries around your consumption of alcohol so that it does not lead to harm. The issue is not alcohol. The issue is your relationship with alcohol. And if you use alcohol as one of a diversity of different emotion management systems, it has great benefit without liability. A couple of rules though. Number one, have very strict preordained boundaries around your use of alcohol. Whether you're using it on the spur of the moment or in a pre-planned fashion, I'm going to have dinner tonight, I'm going to have a glass of wine with my dinner, or hi buddy, come and have a beer with me, that's fine. But be very cognizant in a pre-planned, decision-made way about what your exact boundaries are. Know what your limits are, because you have to self-limit. Your body won't limit. Puking and passing out is not control of alcoholism, it's toxicity. The human body has no way to control how much you drink. There's no negative feedback pathway. So you have to preordain how much you're going to drink. And a couple of drinks here and there, a glass of wine is fine, a bottle not so much. So preordain that. The second thing is, try not to drink too often when you're alone, particularly when you're alone and depressed or down. Don't use alcohol as a way to medicate depression. Mostly use it when you're fun or for fun or when you're in a pleasurable way. Much easier to have boundaries around it under those conditions. But don't use it when you're depressed. Don't lean on it as a way to dig you out of that hole of depression. Both biologically, psychologically, it's going to drive you deeper. So be very careful with that. But have tight boundaries. The other very tight boundary I have, if you have diseases like metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, the alcohol's fine. We don't necessarily drink alcohol for its sugar content. We're drinking it for its alcohol content. So if you have a glass of wine or a beer that has some carbohydrates in it, no worries. It's not going to make you suddenly fat. If you are diabetic, be very careful about this. We're going to discuss this on the cons in a second. However, don't use alcohol as a vehicle for getting in sugary mixers. That rum and coke, that whiskey, at least that gin and tonic water has a ton of sugar in it. Do not use alcohol, particularly the spirits, as a vehicle for consuming high concentrations of sugary mixes. My wife Janae makes an excellent keto margarita. And it's the tequila with Crystal Light lemonade and salt. Nobody knows, none of our guests ever know that that's what they're drinking. And it's fine to have from time to time. We do that probably once a month, once every 2 months on a Mexican night. No harm there whatsoever. So it has tremendous asset value as long as you have tight boundaries alcohol's absolutely fine. So don't demonize people who do drink alcohol. Now, on the con side, if you've used alcohol to the point of harm and then disregarded the harm to continue the relationship, we have a problem. If you've had DUIs, if you've gotten drunk 3 or 4 days in a row, if you get drunk and wake up the next morning and have to drink to make yourself feel better, if you've avoided work, avoided certain situations because of your drinking, recognize you have a problem. And the problem with alcoholism is not alcohol, it's your relationship with it. When it becomes more and more of an exclusive, dominant, chronically excessively used mechanism of instant emotional management to repress the issues you should be dealing with in your life, you have a problem. When it's caused significant harm, you have a problem. And the last person to recognize that they are an alcoholic is the alcoholic themselves. So be aware of what other people think and say. We have a couple of friends who we love dearly, but they're so obviously alcoholics. And the question is, how do we broach the topic with them? And I know that can be very, very difficult. There's a time and a place, but at some stage, because we care, it is important to give those folks that feedback, not in a critical way, but in a, hey, have you ever thought of? But don't be that innocent bystander and watch them kill themselves. At the same time, don't be critical. But helping somebody like that can be very, very difficult, very challenging. But we sometimes need that help. So if you're using alcohol as a dominant primary emotion management system to the point of harm and you're ignoring the harm to continue the relationship, that relationship is broken. That relationship always will be broken. You no longer have control of that relationship. You are an alcoholic. Find help, get help. AA is great. There are other mechanisms that help. But have that ownership first. And obviously, that is where alcohol has superseded its value, and the only way to deal with addiction is through abstinence. Cutting back doesn't break the habit. That's a topic for a whole nother day. No different than carbohydrate addiction is alcoholism. Very, very similar. Okay, so we've talked about alcoholism. But there are other places where alcohol can be toxic. We've also talked about the role that sugar plays as a mixer with alcohol. That's a problem. And a lot of people who successfully quit smoking gain a ton of weight. That's because they didn't really quit smoking. They just went from nicotine to carbohydrates, which are both drugs. At the same time, if you go ketogenic, if you quit carbohydrates, and I say, okay, it's okay to drink alcohol, don't trade in sugar for alcohol. Don't become the alcoholic that's really proud of the fact that they don't consume carbohydrates. Find an effort-based mechanism for replacing the role of a drug in your life. Don't substitute one drug for another one. You have a vulnerability to addictive behavior. Understand that relationship and maybe even talk to a friend or a family member about helping you through that. Now, what are the other cons of alcohol as you start and as you go on a ketogenic diet? Well, alcohol is metabolized primarily in the liver by a series of enzymatic pathways. The first one is the aldehyde dehydrogenase pathway, the ALDH, which plays a minor role. The largest role is performed by something called alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH. And a lot of these pathways weren't created evolutionarily to take care of our relationship with Jack Daniels. God and nature didn't foresee that. So these are pathways that pre-existed for other purposes that alcohol now hijacks in its metabolism. And the ADH pathway, the cytochrome P450 pathway, the catalase pathway, are very, very important to managing particularly carbohydrates, but also lipids and proteins. And with ADH, with alcohol dehydrogenase, the pathway is toward acetaldehyde and then acetate and carbon dioxide. And acetyl-CoA, which is part of the glucose and lipid metabolism pathways. So lipids and cholesterol are biosynthesized through the acetyl-CoA pathway. And if you drink a lot of alcohol, it affects your body's ability to do that. It can knock you out of ketosis because it disrupts the lipid ketone gluconeogenic pathway. So If you're trying to get into ketosis, or if you are in ketosis, it's fine to get knocked out from time to time by a drink. That's what happens in my life. I restore that very quickly. But early on, for the first 3 months or so of starting a ketogenic diet, my advice is always stay away from alcohol until you get into that steady state. And then you can make the decision. The other value of staying off alcohol for 3 months is it loses its importance as a transitional drug for you. So I always advocate for that. And certainly if you are diabetic, be very careful for this, because there's a disruption of the glucose pathway and you can go rapidly into hypoglycemia. And that reactive hypoglycemia can be very, very dangerous for diabetics, because alcohol blocks gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis, in other words, the release of sugar and production of sugar by your liver. So if you've been in a fasted state, you drink some alcohol, you're diabetic, you take your insulin, you just crash and your sugar bottoms out, and you've got to then consume a ton of sugar to prevent that hypoglycemia, but you're too drunk to do that, and bad things happen. So if you're diabetic, not a good idea to drink too much alcohol. And then there is a category of people, the Korean and the Japanese, and a lot of the folks from the East that'll have one drink and turn bright red. They have an alcohol dehydrogenase deficiency. They either have a polymorphism of the gene or the gene is absent. And they just can't tolerate alcohol because they can't use that communal pathway of alcohol acetaldehyde conversion. And then the alcohol builds up very quickly in their bloodstream and is highly toxic. Turn bright red, and get drunk very quickly because even a small amount of alcohol doesn't get metabolized adequately by the liver. So understanding the biochemistry of how alcohol works and understanding what illnesses and what problems you have biologically, you can then decide whether alcohol is a good idea or not, as well as looking at the pleasure side and the harm of addictive behavior. I love alcohol. I love South African wine. My best friend is a huge wine producer in South Africa, and we've been drinking alcohol since we were 4 years old. We basically weaned from breast milk to red wine at the age of about 4. It's part of our cultural identity, cultural history. And that is a very valuable thing because there's a socialization, there's tremendous asset value to alcohol in our cultural environment. And so many cultures have that. But think about this. If you look at hunter-gatherer societies, almost all hunter-gatherer societies have alcohol available, fermented products available for ceremonial purposes, to induce a state of euphoria, to induce a state of catatonic state where they can get and connect with ancestors, connect with a spiritual side of their lives. But because that alcohol is only available from time to time for special events, very, 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 very few people, if any at all, in hunter-gatherer societies, in societies that have a healthy respect for alcohol for ceremonial purposes only, ever become alcoholics. They use it on purpose to induce a state of euphoria, that tranquility, that connection with an endorphin-free part of their brains. From time to time, in rare occasions, for a spiritual connection. Absolutely fine. Hunter-gatherer communities do not have alcoholism as a problem until they lose their hunter-gatherer lives. Speak to the Inuit, speak to the Eskimos, speak to the native Indians in America, what a scourge alcoholism has become. But that is as a dysfunctional emotional management system. Don't blame alcohol for our relationship with it. Alcohol has tremendous asset value. And I've created very specific boundaries around my alcohol consumption because I enjoy it, it has asset value, and it doesn't cause liability. If it has caused liability, either through its biology or through the behavioral aspects, the addiction aspects, of course stay the hell away. But don't demonize globally because it doesn't work for you. At the same time, don't convince other people that it's perfectly fine to use if you know that for them it's not a good idea. And finally, folks, have the integrity, have the intestinal fortitude to help friends that you dearly, dearly love to recognize that they may have a problematic, addictive relationship with alcohol. You may get scorned, you may get ostracized, but if you pick your moment, if you are kind, if you are non-judgmental, non-critical, in raising that awareness and being present to help them through this. Every alcoholic needs a shoulder to lean on when they want to begin to change, because it's tough. Never been there, but watch it happen. I hope this helps. I know that so many of you just want to vomit out a whole bunch of comments, pro and against. That's what this video is here for. This video is here to help you to think about a particular subject. Take a stance. You can demonize it, you can liberalize it, but do so for yourself, not for everybody else. And if I've made you think, and if I've made you develop some respect for something that can be useful but also has a very dark edge to it, let's see how you use it. Leave comments down below, but subscribe. And don't be critical. Don't criticize for the sake of hurting and being assholes. I've got plenty of trolls. Leave a comment that makes you think and makes me think, just like hopefully this video did. Take care. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.